An irregular staccato patter of rain echoed through the worn-out chambers of Peter's small private office. The dimly lit room, filled with the musky scent of old books and a hint of stale coffee, was nestled on the top floor of a waning apartment building in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. A feeble table lamp cast trembling shadows on stacks of yellowing papers that sprawled out like a modest cityscape over his cluttered desk. Peter, a man worn down by years and burdened with the solemn quietude of his own thoughts, sat hunched over a photograph. It was faded by time, dog-eared, bearing the faces of the missing, the lost souls of Pine Bluff. There was a solemn humanness about him as he studied the photo. His kind eyes, despite the unsettling subject, harbored a sense of profound sincerity. On his desk, raindrops danced on the window as they raced down the glass, reflecting 1,000 sorrowful goodbyes. He reached out to touch them, fingers tracing the droplets' paths. The faces in the photograph seemed to blur under the weight of his gaze, a haunting mirror to his past. Anxiety, he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible over the monotonous drone of the rain, is a bit like a sewer. His words hung in the air, straddling the boundary between a joke and a revelation. In the years since his diagnosis, he had grown fond of such dark humor. Yet as he turned his gaze from the window to the map of the town's sewers sprawled on his desk, his smile faded. The comparison felt too real, too close. A knock echoed through the room, a brief but sharp rap of knuckles against old wood. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing Sheriff Dunn's tall silhouette framed in the doorway. The sheriff, a portly man with a thick mustache and eyes that told tales of 1,000 sleepless nights, held in his hands a brown envelope. "Peter," he started, his gruff voice coated with a layer of unease. "Got something you might want to look at." Peter took the envelope, noting the creased worry lines etching a deeper story on the sheriff's weathered face. Inside, he found more photographs, pictures of graffiti scrawled on the sewer walls, strange symbols and cryptic inscriptions. His heart clenched as he drew a shuddering breath, something eerie and familiar lurking in the edges of those scribbled shapes. "You reckon there's a connection?" the sheriff asked, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. He found himself drawn back to the images, the symbols whispering tales of a mystery buried beneath the town. He felt the edges of his old trauma stir within him, and he squashed it down, asserting control. "I don't know yet, Dunn," he replied, voice steady but eyes never leaving the photos. "But I aim to find out." It was at this moment that the rain seemed to pause, holding its breath in anticipation. Beneath the rhythmic drumming of water against glass, he heard a faint whisper, a specter of fear that seemed to resonate with the wind. It was an echo from the depths, a call from the belly of the beast. As the dawn stretched its golden fingers over Pine Bluff, Peter stood at the mouth of the sewer, staring down into the dark abyss. The smell of decay clung to the damp air, a sharp contrast to the wholesome scent of morning dew that blanketed the town above. His heart pounded in his chest, each thump a drum echoing the call of his looming descent. The rusty iron bars bore silent witness to his trepidation. Down there in the depths, he knew he would encounter more than just the physical detritus of Pine Bluff. The sewers, much like his anxiety, were a symbol of the hidden, the unacknowledged, the forgotten. Shaking off the tight knot of unease, he stepped forward, armed with nothing more than his worn-out map and a reliable lantern. As he ventured deeper, he became a mere shadow dancing on the graffiti-streaked walls. The echoes of water dripping into dark pools played a symphony of the macabre, drowning out the comforting songs of morning birds. The air was thick and heavy, pressing against his senses and making his torchlight seem feeble against the overwhelming darkness. He found himself enveloped by solitude, punctuated only by the occasional murmur of rats scurrying unseen in the darkness. Despite the oppressive solitude, there was a sort of kinship here. His anxiety, ever his faithful companion, was with him in these moments, whispering old fears into his ear. Yet he pressed on, his footsteps slow but resolute. In the cold, hushed silence of the sewers, he came across a wall bearing the same cryptic symbols he'd seen in the photographs. His fingers traced the chilled stone, the rough texture of the painted symbols echoing a haunting melody of past and present merging. Secrets, he muttered to himself, the word hanging in the dank air. He felt a strange resonance with the wall, the painted symbols, the chilling echoes of the sewer. It was like reading a language he had forgotten, he knew. Suddenly, a soft, pulsating force pulled him deeper into the labyrinth, an invisible undercurrent drawing him towards a particular tunnel. The sensation was inexplicable and instinctive. Despite his racing heart, he found himself drawn to this force, a moth lured by the flame of curiosity. As he walked through the tunnel, he found the remnants of what appeared to be arcane rituals. An ancient-looking stone altar sat in the center of a cavernous chamber, surrounded by a perfect circle of burnt-out candles. The sight sent a shiver running down his spine. His anxiety responded in kind, a cacophony of warning bells ringing in his head. Dread had painted an elaborate mural in the chamber, a symphony of fear orchestrated in silence. Yet his gaze was drawn towards a single phrase etched on the wall behind the altar that stirred a haunting familiarity within him. It was like a whisper from the past, an echo that bounced through the chambers of his heart. From the depths, we ascend. As the whispers grew louder, he realized he was no longer alone in the depths of the sewers. Something lurked in the shadows, unseen but omnipresent, watching him. He felt it in the echoes bouncing off the grimy walls, in the shadows that danced in his torchlight. Something ancient, something hungry. His breath hitched in his chest, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He stood there at the precipice of the unknown, staring into the face of his past traumas and the lurking terror of Pine Bluff. In the days following his descent, Peter began to weave together the threads of a dark tapestry hidden beneath Pine Bluff. The town's usual tranquil facades seemed tainted to him now, stained by the invisible ink of sinister undercurrents. His investigation pulled him into the heart of the town's historical archives, a labyrinth of knowledge almost as intimidating as the sewers themselves. Poring over aging books and dusty manuscripts, he began to unearth secrets that time had eagerly buried. Tales of a mysterious cult wound themselves around the town's history, coiled around the roots of its founding families. A blackened veil, it seemed, had been draped over Pine Bluff for generations, a shroud that concealed the whispered pacts and forgotten rites. Meanwhile, he found himself drawn towards the peculiar behavior of the townsfolk. Their eyes held an odd, glassy sheen, their smiles too uniform, their laughter devoid of genuine warmth. Conversations seemed rehearsed, each word a note in a tune that held no melody. It was as if an unseen puppeteer pulled at their strings, a force he had come to recognize all too well. One afternoon, he crossed paths with Clara, the town librarian. Clara was a spinster, her aging grace adorned with a veneer of wisdom that commanded respect. As he shared his observations with her, he noticed a shiver pass through Clara, a ripple disturbing the placid surface of her well-composed demeanor. "You tread on sacred ground, Peter," she warned, her voice barely a whisper. The veiled threat hung in the air, an echo of the unseen dangers lurking beneath the town. He was unfazed. His traumatic past had forged him into a vessel of resilience. He gazed at Clara, his silence a fortress against her words. "You may be right, Clara," he replied evenly, "but I intend to uncover the truth." In the solitude of his office later that night, he felt a chilling sense of familiarity. He saw the hypnotic influence of the cult reflecting his own struggles with anxiety, a warped mirror image of his mind's control. Fear, he realized, was a universal puppeteer, the threads it pulled capable of ensnaring not just a solitary man, but an entire town. As the days bled into nights, he found himself caught in a relentless dance. Between his investigations and the ever-watchful eyes of the townsfolk, he was spinning, spiraling towards the epicenter of an unfathomable mystery. The whispers grew louder, the echoes of the sewers ringing in his ears, an ominous drumbeat to the rhythm of his investigation. In the quiet stillness of his office, he sat back, the gravity of his findings weighing heavy on his mind. The eerie symbols, the cult, the brainwashed townsfolk, They were all pieces of an intricate puzzle, a cosmic design far more terrifying than he had initially perceived. He knew then that his journey was far from over. He had only lifted a corner of the blackened veil. The real horror, the true face of the abyss, still awaited him in the depths. And in that realization, he felt the stirrings of an old, familiar fear. Yet alongside it, a new resolve was kindled, burning brighter with every passing second. The return to the sewers felt like a descent into an age-old nightmare, each echoing drip a haunting reminder of Peter's first venture into the depths. He felt the familiar curl of apprehension unfurl within him, his anxiety singing a chilling lullaby in the shadows of his mind. Yet he pressed on, drawn by an unyielding resolve, a need to unveil the shrouded truth that lurked beneath Pine Bluff. Navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, he was drawn towards a previously unexplored path. The air here held an ancient chill, a cold that seemed to seep from the very stone itself. The torchlight barely penetrated the gloom, and the graffiti symbols seemed to twist and morph in the flickering light, alive with an eldritch energy. The path led him to a cavern, larger and more menacing than the one he'd found before. The air was dense, a palpable murkiness that cloaked the room in a shroud of dread. At the center, an obelisk stood tall, etched with the same symbols that had started to haunt his dreams. Suddenly, a bone-chilling chorus filled the chamber, a symphony of whispers rising from the darkness, carrying tales of eons past. He could feel unseen eyes upon him, observing him from the blackened corners of the cavern. The abyss was watching. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his heart pounding desperately against his ribs. Yet he found himself drawn towards the obelisk, its presence pulling at something primal within him. His fingers brushed against the stone surface, and a rush of images flooded his mind, a tidal wave of alien visions and forgotten horrors. He saw the townsfolk gathered in shadowy rituals beneath the cloak of night, their faces blank and eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. He saw the faces of the missing, their expressions twisted in a horrifying rapture as they embraced the dark. He saw himself standing at the precipice of the abyss, its formless horror reaching out towards him. He recoiled, gasping for breath as the echoes of the vision continued to resonate within him. His mind was a whirlpool of terror, his anxiety screaming for him to flee. Yet he forced himself to calm, drawing on the same inner strength that had seen him through years of living with his disorder. Summoning every shred of his resolve, he turned his gaze back to the obelisk. The whispers had quietened. The unseen audience seemed to hold its breath. In that silence, he reached out once more, pressing his palm flat against the stone. The obelisk pulsed beneath his touch, a heartbeat that echoed the rhythm of his own. His mind teetered on the precipice of understanding, of recognizing the formless horror that loomed in the dark. Yet he knew he had to return to the surface, to the facade of normalcy that Pine Bluff had crafted so skillfully. There were more secrets to uncover, more threads to unravel. With a lingering look at the obelisk, he retraced his steps back to the entrance of the sewer. As he emerged into the twilight of the coming dawn, he knew that the abyss had changed him. Its eyes had seen into his soul, its whispers had filled his mind, and he was no longer just an observer. He became a part of the mystery, an actor on the cosmic stage of Pine Bluff's dark symphony. Days faded into a timeless blur as Peter plunged further into the enigma that was Pine Bluff. A ceaseless tangle of leads, hushed conversations, and chilling discoveries occupied his time above ground. Yet it was the beckoning pull of the abyss below that gnawed at the corners of his mind, a constant hum that was growing increasingly difficult to ignore. In the sleepless nights, he found himself confronted with memories of the obelisk. He saw the glyphs etched into its surface dance in the darkness behind his closed eyelids, their silent song winding its way into his dreams. He felt an uncanny connection to the ancient stone, a bond that transcended time and reality. With each passing day, the townsfolk grew more distant, their eyes clouding over with a veil of suspicion. He felt their gazes on him, cold as the stone obelisk, their whispers trailing him like spectral chains. He was an outsider now, a threat to the veiled order that had held Pine Bluff captive for generations. Yet he pressed on, fueled by a growing sense of dread and a resilient will to expose the town's ancient curse. He felt the pull of the abyss grow stronger, its whispers growing louder in his ears, its echoes resonating within his heart. And then the night arrived when he could no longer resist the call. Under the blanket of darkness, he once again descended into the sewers. This time, his steps were not hesitant. They held a determined rhythm, echoing off the grimy walls and leading him deeper into the labyrinth. The cavern loomed in front of him, its obelisk pulsating with an eerie luminescence, a beacon guiding him through the suffocating darkness. The air buzzed with an alien energy, the stone humming a hymn that only he could hear. He moved closer, the familiar dread dancing on the fringes of his consciousness. His hand reached out, pressing against the cold surface of the obelisk. This time, he was prepared for the onslaught of visions, the torrent of whispers that surged towards him. A sense of profound understanding washed over him. He was not merely up against a town's dark history. He was confronting an ancient force that thrived on fear, a cosmic horror that fed on the minds of Pine Bluff's residents. He was in its lair, its eyes watching him from the abyss. In that moment, a surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins. This was his fight, his chance to break free from the clutches of fear. His past trauma, his struggle with anxiety, had all led him to this pivotal moment. With renewed resolve, Peter tore his hand from the obelisk. The cavern around him seemed to shudder, the whispers growing into a frenzied cacophony. He turned his back on the obelisk, on the abyss in its haunting gaze, and ran. As he sprinted through the labyrinth, he felt a seismic shift within him. He was no longer the hunted, but the hunter. No longer a mere spectator, but a player in this cosmic game. The echoes of the abyss chased him, their cries a fading symphony in the recesses of the tunnels. He emerged from the sewer just as dawn began to break, its golden rays cutting through the gloom of Pine Bluff. He felt a sense of release, of breaking free from a confining cocoon, even as the undercurrent of his terrifying experience hummed beneath the surface. He had faced the eyes of the abyss and lived to tell the tale. He was changed, marked by his encounter with the cosmic horror beneath the town. In the embrace of the early morning light, Peter understood. His past trauma, his struggles had shaped him, tempered him into a man capable of facing the unseen horrors. He was a beacon in the dark, a sentinel against the abyss. And though the echoes of Pine Bluff would forever haunt him, he would stand, resolute and undaunted, ready to face whatever cosmic horrors the future might hold. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like it and subscribe to our channel, where you can find more similar stories, and click on the bell icon to never miss one. There is plenty more cosmic horror to come from the Eldritch Tales Factory. Stay tuned, and until next time.